Hi, and welcome to another segment of How to Live Your Best Life with me, Dr. Paul Meschino. Thank you for joining me this month and for this segment. Well, tonight's topic, I would like to discuss what makes you happy. And I think this is an appropriate subject for this time of year because this time of year, people tend to get the blues. They may feel kind of discontent with life, down. They may feel, this time of year, they may feel kind of like they're doing the same thing over and over again. They're in a rut. They kind of get depressed. And if you're not careful, before you know it, you're in a clinical depression for some people. This is a very common time of year to get clinical depression. And we know how rampant that depression is and anxiety is this time of year. We know that actually the use of antidepressants have jumped 65% in the past 15 years. So clinical depression is a real thing, and anxiety is a real thing that has become rampant in our society. So tonight I want to focus on kind of the antidote to that. This is a piece of the puzzle, I think, for them and for people who kind of get down this time of year. And that's to focus on your happiness. And really, the cool thing is that there's a science to happiness. There's a science to happiness. And so what I mean by happiness is, what they mean in the literature is that there's a sense of well-being within you. There's an internal sense of well-being, internal sense of fulfillment and well-being. And it's a subjective experience. So when they go to measure that, they can't measure it objectively. So they give people questionnaires and they rate themselves on their mood from a scale of 0 to 10. Hey everybody, thanks for joining me. And so they rate themselves from 0 to 10 on their mood relative to certain circumstances in life. And what they find is that there's certain circumstances that actually cause people to feel happy, well, and fulfilled. There's actually certain, and it's amazing. And look, there's a lot of things in life that can make you feel happy. There are a lot of things out there, but where do you put your focus and why? There's an old adage that says that, people look for happiness or love in all the wrong places. Well, guess what? There's truth to that. They do. But not that they don't want to feel well or they don't want to be happy or they don't want to feel fulfilled, but they end up putting their energy and their focus in the wrong areas. And then they're disappointed by life. Then they start to feel down and depressed and they get into anxiety and all these other things that happen to them. So I want to go through the research and let you know, and it goes through quite astoundingly and quite eye-opening in a way that they put the building blocks together to what actually causes people to feel happy, well, where to put your focus there, why to do that. So I want to explain that to you and where the research goes from there. And I think you'll find this a fascinating journey. So you'll know how to get results, where to put your focus and why, how to build happiness into your life, feeling well and fulfilled. And the first thing that we discovered, and this is kind of cool, is that everybody has a certain happiness set point. That means that, and they don't know why it happens this way, we're just born with it. We're just born with a certain happiness set point, whether it's our genes, whether it's our brain chemistry, whether it's our family upbringing, we don't know. But we're all born with a certain happiness set point. Now, some people are just born with a happier or more cheerful disposition than others. It's kind of like a thermostat. You set it at a certain temperature and the room temperature can go a little higher, a little lower, but it averages out to a certain set point, a certain temperature. The same thing with people. They have a certain set point of happiness they can obtain. Some people may be, say on a scale of 0 to 10, some people may be a 6, and they get up to an 8 in happiness and low as a 4. So they have highs and lows, but it averages out to a 6. Some people are an 8. Then they go up to a 10, down to a 6. So they range between 10 and 6, but they're average out to an 8. And you know this in your life. If you look at the people in your life, there are certain people in your life that are probably cheerful no matter what slings and arrows life throws at them. There's other people that fret no matter how many blessings or how many gifts the world gives them. And we realize, and that what the scientists realize is that this happiness set point is set for each individual person. It varies for each individual, and it's very difficult to change that set point. Now, just because you may have a low set point does not mean you have to be clinically depressed all the time or not enjoy life. It's kind of like going to a yoga class. Some people are just more flexible than others. You can still enjoy the class, you just may not be as flexible as the other person, but you can still totally enjoy your life, still totally enjoy the class, if you will. So that's a baseline or a sort of background by which we participate in life through a sort of happiness set point, as I mentioned. But there's much more to it than that. There's other things that contribute to your happiness beyond our genes, beyond our brain biochemistry, or beyond our family upbringing. And that is the conditions of your life. There's certain conditions that cause us to feel happy, well, and fulfilled. And this information is kind of counterintuitive. For instance, the old adage that money can't buy happiness is found to be absolutely incorrect. It's wrong, okay? Science has actually proven this. It's a real thing. Money can buy you happiness, okay? That's why buying 70 billion people buy lottery tickets every year. It's an $80 billion industry, okay? So money does buy happiness. This is the catch though. Money does buy happiness, but up to a certain point. Beyond that point, it has really little impact on your happiness. For instance, if you're a single mother and you're making minimum wage and you win the lottery of say $500,000, well, that improves your happiness quotient hugely and it can sustain there for quite a long time. But if you're, let's say, a CEO of a big corporation, you're making $250,000 to $500,000 a year and you win a lottery of $1 million, sure, your happiness quotient goes up, but for a relatively short period of time, you buy that Lamborghini, get a new house, you feel good, but basically you're pretty much back to where you were before you won the lottery pretty quickly. So it's really not sustainable. So if you have a lot of money, then adding more money to get more happiness is really not going to work. But if you're low in income and you're starving for money, money can definitely improve your happiness. The other thing they found was that people with chronic illnesses can be just as happy as people in great health. Okay? For instance, if you have, let's say you're diagnosed with a chronic condition such as diabetes. Well, at first, you're pretty depressed about that. But if your diabetes condition remains, doesn't get any worse, remains at a certain level, it doesn't deteriorate, then most people pretty much adapt to that level of being and can get up to a level of happiness again like they were before they had the illness. Basically, if the condition continues to deteriorate, so does your mood. But if it stabilizes, you kind of adapt to that most people do, adapt to that new level of condition of health, and you can actually be just as happy as people with good health. The other thing they found was that if you do have an illness and you somehow attain an ability to feel well inside, be happy and fulfilled, it actually helps you heal and get healthy again. So cool. Well, that's great. Now, these are some of the conditions that improve our level of happiness in our lives. But there's one condition that trumps all other conditions, including health and wealth. It has more of an impact on our happiness than anything else, and that is family and community. You probably know this. It's shown that people with tight-knit families and strong communities are much happier than those people who don't have that. Marriage is particularly important. If you have a happy marriage, it strongly correlates with people being happy. If you don't have a happy marriage, people can be miserable. So these are the things, and this is why this particular understanding of personal relationships, how important they are, is why I put so many videos together on personal relationships and how to create strong bonds, and doing Facebook posts on that on our Facebook page. So I want to share that with you. Now, so there's health, wealth, family, community. And those are the strongest conditions. But guess what? There's actually a factor that's even more important than any of those things, that has an impact and enhances your happiness quotient above any of those things. And that is to do with your expectations. This is really interesting. We all have certain personal expectations of ourselves and our lives. And if our external reality matches our expectations that we have inside our head, we are pretty content, we're pretty happy beyond anything else. And this is why they found that us modern humans, are really no happier, even in spite of our material comforts that we've created for ourselves, than our medieval counterparts. It has to do with expectations. And it's not about the things, right? So all these technological things that we have available to us, all these comforts we have, are not making us any happier. I'll give you an idea what this entails. For instance, let's say you go to rent a car and you're expecting a Tesla, okay? And instead they bring out a used, beat up, old, secondhand Fiat for you. Well, feel pretty deprived. But let's say you're living in medieval times and you're expecting an ox cart with a strong ox, and they bring out an ox cart with a strong ox, man, you're happy. So it's not about the thing. It's about your expectations being fulfilled that actually determines your happiness. So if your expectations are fulfilled, I call it your virtual reality, what you envision for yourself inside your head, and it comes true in your external reality, man, you're happy. But if you have expectations in your head, your virtual reality, and your reality are not matching, there's a gap between the two, then you're pretty feeling deprived or depressed. The greater the gap, the greater the expectation and the unfulfillment of it in your reality, the greater the depression. Now, this is what I find personally, when I do consults with people and I work with people, is the most common reason for them to become discontent about life, unfulfilled, even depressed. We all have these, most people have some relative health in their life, some wealth, some family and community. But we have this virtual reality, these expectations that we want to have a better relationship. We envision a different relationship for ourselves, or we want to improve our family dynamic. Otherwise, then we would be happy, or we want to have a beautiful house, or we want to have a nice car, or we want to travel, and we're not getting that, so we feel pretty depressed. So we have it envisioned in our head what we love to aspire to, and we're not fulfilling that. We say to ourselves things like, "Well, I'm 30 years old now. I should be financially having a good career at this point. Well, how come I don't have a good career?" I mean, your vision of self having a good career, they don't have a good career, so you feel down. Or I'm 40 years old, I should have this, or I should have that, I should be this. 50 years old, I should have this. I'm 60 years old, I should have this. And so we play out these expectations of ourselves that we're not fulfilling in our reality, and we get pretty depressed. Or we're comparing ourselves to the Joneses. Well, they have that, and they have this, and they get to travel, and they get to do this. How come I can't do that? We envision ourselves traveling, but we can't do it. Our reality doesn't match our virtual reality, and we get pretty depressed. This is the most common reason I find people, they compare themselves to some virtual reality, some expectation inside their head that it's not fulfilling. And so if you're unhappy in your life, if you're feeling down, if you have a lack of energy, if you maybe feel helpless or hopeless, or you're feeling fatigued all the time, I find this to be probably at least part of something that's going on with people. And either you go out and get the thing, so there's a gap between your virtual and reality. You want to go out and get that thing that you expect, and you go get it in your life and make it a part of your reality, or you close the gap between your virtuality and reality. And this is kind of partly what I do with people in my consultations. Really, it's an old teaching. It goes back to prophets and poets and philosophers 1,000 years ago. And the lesson they gave us was that being satisfied with what you have is far more important than striving for more of what you want. Yeah? And the science actually shows this to be true. People are much happier by appreciating the life that they have rather than striving for more of what they want. Now, the ironic thing is that if you love your life the way it is, it turns into the life that you love. And so I make this really practical for people in my consultations. I'm like a banker, okay? So they come in, and it's like and they say something's missing in their life. So let's say I'm like a banker. Let's say you go to the bank, as an analogy, okay? You go to the bank, and let's say you want $50,000 worth of cash. Well, what does the banker ask you? He says, well, where's your collateral? In other words, what form is your money in? If you can identify it in the form that's in, you can appreciate it in that form, then I'll give it to you in the form which you love. So where is your money? Is it in your house? Okay? Or is it in your social bonds, or your family ties, your community connections that someone's going to co-sign a loan for you? Is it in your career and your future earnings? They have you identify exactly where your money is. Where's that $50,000 that you have right now? It's not in cash, but it's in different form. Once you can appreciate in that form, then they give it to you in the form which you really want, or which you really want to have it in, which you love. How ironic, eh? This is the way life is. When you feel like something's missing in your life and you need to have it, it evades you. But if you feel like you already have it within you, you feel abundant in it, it just comes to you. Yes? So when I do consults with people, I ask them, what do you think is missing in your life? And then we start to find the form that it's in their life already. It's not an exact form which they want, but it's a form in their life that they haven't recognized yet. And there's an art and science to doing this. But once they can actually identify it and they can appreciate it in that form which it's in, wow, their happiness quotient jumps huge. Okay? So they come in feeling one way, depressed, down and out, and lethargic and fatigued, but they leave feeling so much better about their life. They're going, wow, I love my life the way it is. Because they can see now it's already in their life. So they get to transform their life from what it was into the life that they love. That is so powerful. That is, how are we doing so far? Is everyone doing well? Any thumbs up for me? Any likes? You liking it so far? Yeah, great. Hi, everybody. Welcome, everybody. I see everybody who's watching here. This is great. More people have joined on, so welcome, everybody. Now, that isn't it for happiness. There's a whole other level of happiness beyond that you can obtain. There's another factor thank you. There's another factor that actually gives you even another greater level of happiness, fulfillment, and well-being in your life. And the reason for that is because, we're all striving to improve our lives in some way. So we all have aspirations. So once we achieve something, a brand new car, a new house, or whatever, we feel satisfied for a while, but it's really only temporary. So these things that we start to achieve in our lives are temporary fulfillments. We want to see, it doesn't guarantee that our life is going to be sustained in a level of happiness, and well-being and fulfillment for our entire lives. This factor allows us to attain it for our entire lives. And the factor is finding meaning and purpose in your life. Doing something that's meaningful and purposeful to you. So happiness consists in seeing one's entire life as being meaningful and worthwhile and purposeful. If you can find, and when people find this, they do things that are meaningful and purposeful in their life, and they have the capabilities and abilities to create that for themselves, to do that, and they're fully engaged in the process, then their happiness and well-being and fulfillment can be sustained for their entire life. These people live a life of true inspiration, and they get into what's called the flow. And the flow is actually a scientific term by Dr. Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, who wrote a whole book on it, and it's called In the Flow. It's also called being in the groove or being in the zone. When athletes and performers get into the zone, that's what they call. They're in the flow. Also called being on fire, doing what you love, loving what you do. When you're doing this thing for 2 hours or 3 hours or 4 hours, it feels like 3 or 4 or 5 minutes, right? So we lose track of time when we're doing this thing. We're fully engaged in what we're doing, and time just flies by, and before you know it, oh my God, it's done. That's called being in the flow. It's where you're intrinsically motivated to do this thing. No one has to remind you to do this thing, right? You don't have to wake up in the morning and someone's got to say, hey, do this. Oh yeah, okay. You wake up and that's the first thing on your mind that you want to do. That's called being in the flow, or being inspired, having a life that's meaningful and purposeful. Okay? And being in the flow has great benefits. People who are in the flow are more cheerful, they're more happy, they're more active, they're more creative, they're more focused, they have better emotional regulation, they have less worries, less fears, they're more determined, they're more productive, and they feel like they're living a life of meaning and purpose. And so being in the flow is very, very important. Now, being in the flow is totally different than doing things that make you happy. I want to distinguish that too, because it's very common to mix these things up. When you're in the flow, you're commonly not happy at all. You're not sad. You're not frustrated. You're not even aware of your feelings. You're so engaged in the process that you're oblivious to yourself. Okay? You're so engaged. It's only after you finish that moment of time or that period of time that you're in the flow, you look back and then you feel a greater sense of self-worth, and you feel a greater sense of happiness and fulfillment, and you feel cheerful and that type of thing. But being in the flow is actually, you're in the flow enough to, you feel like you're immersed in it. That's called being in the flow. And that's when you know you're living life full of meaning and purpose. And so you're basically as happy, in this level of understanding, you're as happy as you fulfilling your highest values of your life. Whatever's meaningful and purposeful, if you find yourself doing that, you're happy when you're doing that. That's your basis for happiness. Now that is an ultimate experience for a lot of people to get into the flow. That's called self-actualization as far as Maslow is concerned in his hierarchy of needs. But guess what? There's another level of happiness and fulfillment and well-being that goes beyond that. Well, how could that possibly be? Well, for two reasons. One is that doing things that are meaningful and purposeful are actually culturally dependent. Let me explain. Cultures differ in values over periods of time. So for instance, in medieval times, people value things like reading scripture was very valuable. Going on crusades, building a new cathedral was huge, right, in medieval times. That was something worthwhile. And if you were involved with that, you felt like you're living a life full of meaning and purpose. But in our society today, the values have changed. Perhaps things like developing a new software program, or amassing great wealth, or starting a new business or corporation. These are things that can be more valuable. These are more valuable in our life today than they didn't even exist back in medieval times. So there's, depending on the culture. Now listen, if what you find meaningful and purposeful matches the cultural values, if what you value matches the cultural values at that time, then you're going to be paid handsomely for that, and you're going to feel that your life has meaning and purpose and it's worthwhile. But if your values don't match the cultural values of the time, then you're going to feel like an outcast, a misfit, and you're going to feel like your life doesn't have any meaning or purpose. Let me give you an example. Let's say this day and age, if I value, and this is my highest value, this is what I love to do, is speak the extinct language of Greenlandic Norse, then most people will not find that valuable in our society. So I won't feel very well doing that. Even though it's what I love to do, it has no value in society. It feels like it's meaningless and purposeless for me, because it reflects the non-matching of the values of the culture. Yet if I choose something that matches the values of the culture, if I develop a software program, if I develop new technology, Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, these people, wow, it takes off, and it's on fire, and you get paid handsomely for it, and people think you got meaning and purpose. So it's really cultural dependent. The other thing that's important to understand is that you're still striving for meaning and purpose. And some people, based on what they value, may feel that they're not in line with the culture. They're just not right off the culture, but they're not totally in line with it. And therefore, they're always striving to find meaning and purpose. So they're beating themselves up because they feel like I don't have a purpose in life. So there's another level of happiness, fulfillment, and well-being that can be attained that is more inclusive to everybody. And it's based on the understanding of really not striving for any of these things, including happiness, well-being, or fulfillment. Okay? It's kind of a Buddhist philosophy, and it's best attained in meditation. In a meditative state, the idea is to give up striving for anything, including don't strive for happiness. You're not striving for well-being. You're not striving for fulfillment, for achievement of anything. You're not striving to attain anything. You give up all striving. And when you give up all striving, there's a certain serenity of mind that comes into play here. You feel serene, calm, and content. And that's a whole other level of well-being and happiness and fulfillment that can be attained beyond anything else that you could strive for. Now, we often mix up this understanding, this type of philosophy, with us Westerners, because we're always striving for something. We mix it up with thinking that we shouldn't strive for these things. We shouldn't strive for money, or for health, or for community, or for family, or for cars, or for travel, or anything like that. It's wrong to strive for those things. We should give those things up, and we should just go meditate in a cave somewhere. And we should quit reality and go to some reality which is connect to our spirit and live in some cave meditating for 5 to 10 years, which I've seen in Tibet. Anyhow, so we think we should be doing that. We should give, this is wrong, our society, this is the right way. And that's not what the Buddha intended. The idea is, the philosophy is to be in the world, but not of the world. When you get into a meditative state, you realize that you can fully participate in this world, but there's something greater to you than participating in the world. So you participate fully in the world, and you experience the conditions. You still strive for your goals. You still add the conditions to your life that give you happiness. You still, you have aspirations to fulfill. You've got your meaning and purpose in your life. But when you're in this meditative state, you realize there's something greater to you than all of that. You realize you're not your thoughts. You're not your feelings. You're not your aspirations. You're not any of those things. You're fully participating in the world, but there's a part of you that's above all that. You do both. It's a paradox, really. And that's a whole other level of happiness, well-being, and fulfillment that can be obtained through practice of meditation in this way. And there's a whole pile of research when you're in that state that shows tremendous benefits that we get out of being in that state. There's a whole book on this now, just recently published, called Altered Traits by Richard Davidson and Daniel Goleman. That goes, they're both scientists that work on meditative states and go through rigorous scientific studies to show that it impacts the brain, the mind, the body. It enhances people's resilience, outlook, being present, purpose, all that kind of stuff. It helps people develop certain character traits. So if you want to read that, I would advise you to look at that too if you're interested in that. It doesn't give you the how to do it, it just gives you the understanding of what the benefits are. So those are the real building blocks, as science has laid out at this point, of how to create happiness, well-being, and fulfillment in your life. And all you really have to do is put the pieces of the puzzle together. Understand that no one piece is better than any other piece. Okay? We often think that, I have to be that spiritual enlightenment piece. No, you don't want to discard one piece for another. You don't want to, for instance, discard your family or your finances, become spiritually enlightened over here. You don't want to give up and people just run off to Tibet and they meditate for 5 years and discard their family. If you have that peace in your life, you keep that peace. You build on that. So you transcend, yet you include the previous pieces. Don't discard anything. And there's strategies for each level of attainment, each block or each piece of the puzzle. There's strategies to put that into your life. That's where I come into play if you want to do that. I do consults with people that help put those strategies into place to build a sense of well-being and fulfillment and happiness back into their life. Things like, as I mentioned, closing the gap. I have people identify their purpose and really get clear on that. We actually go through a process of that. Meditation, understanding how to meditate this way. So these are things that I do in my consultations and coaching sessions. So at this point, I just want to open up if there's any questions or anything. Did you enjoy tonight? Hopefully you did, and you learned something from tonight. But if you put these pieces together, you can't help but build a fulfilling life. I've people that come in feeling pretty depressed. If I can identify which pieces need to be put in place, they put them into place during the session. They leave a lot happier going out than when they came in, a lot more fulfilled and sustainable for them. So if you're interested in any questions, I'm looking online here if there's anything going on. I see some people joining in now. This is great. Thank you for joining me. Great to see everybody, by the way. And if there's no further questions, I'd let you know that this video will be up on YouTube as well. I have a YouTube channel, Dr. Paul Meschino. Just go into YouTube, Dr. Paul Meschino, and you'll see this video coming up soon. It'll be probably next day or two. It'll be there. And there's other videos that I've done previously on my Facebook Lives that you can attune to as well. So without any further questions, you can personal message me if you want. You can contact me at my office, 905-737-0810. Thank you for the hearts and the likes and all that stuff. I appreciate it. Let me know what your feedback is. I appreciate that too. And until the next time, the next segment, live your best life. This is Dr. Paul Meschino signing off. Thank you.